Hello, hello. It is me, Legendary, and I'm going to yap about the Charlie interference that the devs of Foxhole have implemented in the current ongoing war on the Charlie server. And of course, this is on the 27th of January 2025. So let's have a chat about what exactly is going on. So earlier today, the devs made an announcement on the Foxhole official Discord that the current war on Charlie is basically coming to an end. And this is the first time that the devs have actively gone and started the halting of a war purely based on the length of the war itself. So before this, on Abel's server or on the Able shard, the devs have previously started rolling down victory point requirements to make one of the factions end within a certain timeline. But throughout Foxhole's history, this has only occurred when a major update is about to be implemented on the servers. So this is normally after a certain period of time, the devs decide that they need to roll out some critical changes or some major updates to the game, and the war basically needs to start over to allow for these new effects to take place. However, this is not the case this time. This is the first time on the Charlie server where the devs have just decided to intervene with the persistent world that takes place within Foxhole on that server, and decided that starting on Friday, there is going to be a new war with a fresh starting positions, new resources, and all the previous work that all the Charlie players have been doing up until this point will basically be evaporated, and everyone will have a fresh, clean slate to start off the next Charlie war. So this means on Wednesday, the 29th of January, the victory point requirements will start to tick down until one of the sides is victorious. And currently, that looks like it is going to be the Charlie Colonial players. So you might be wondering, well, why are the devs doing this? Well, let's first take a look at the starting condition of what the Charlie server looked like. So the Charlie server looked a little bit like this. That started in and around the November/December time slot. So if you might think, well, hang on, wait a second, that doesn't look like it has moved very much at all. Well, you'd be right, because I have deceived you. This is not the starting position of the world map at the start of the Charlie War. This is. Now, if you can't quite clearly see what happened, this is the amount of progress that the Charlie players have been able to do, or to have been able to make, over a span of almost 3 months now. Not a lot of territories have changed hands, and the tech tree on the Charlie server has basically been maxed out. So all the toys are now in effect. So you might be wondering, well, can't we just let this play out? Can't we just see what happens when all these newish / not as experienced players have an opportunity to break free of the stalemate that is currently taking place? Are the devs really just the worst people in the world? Is DevMan actually bad? Well, not really. And I'm here to clear up some of the allegations being thrown out there, as well as give you my personal opinion about why the Charlie server is facing a reset. And essentially, it has to come down to the current state of the war, the lack of significant progress being made by the Charlie players, at nothing at fault other than just a few factors that is within the Foxhole game world. So, is DevMan bad? No, they're not bad, at least for this decision. But it requires a bit of clarification, and it also requires a bit of discussion. Hence why I'm yapping about it. So, why is the game being reset? Why are the Charlie players, quote unquote, being punished and all their hard work being undone by DevMan and making the war end a little bit too early? essentially, it's for game health reasons. The war needs to have a conclusion at some point, and the time frame at which that conclusion occurs is significant to prevent further player burnout. Player burnout in Foxhole is very much a real thing. You will see a lot of discussions on the internet about Foxhole players burning out, or at worst crashing out, and they just go completely nuts because the wars take too long. It requires a lot of player time and a lot of player effort. And it's at this point in time that the Charlie server is in such a stalemate that the devs have now decided to intervene. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why are the servers being intervened in this way? Why are the devmans doing this? Well, the three main reasons is we have to remember that the Charlie server is designed for new players to have an introductory experience to Foxhole. So a lot of the tactics and a lot of the weaponry and the various skills that get implemented in the game will naturally be experienced by all players as the game progresses down the tech tree. So for new players who are just starting out with Foxhole now, when they load into the Charlie server, they will immediately have exposure to battle tanks, heavy artillery, advanced bunkers, advanced ships, so like battleships and frigates and destroyers. They won't have that natural progression that makes the Foxhole world so interesting and unique. Now, of course, this isn't the sole reason for the Charlie server, but this is the basis for the Charlie server existing. It is a proving ground for new players to try things out at a much smaller scale, and it's going to sound terrible, but it is also in a less serious format. Now, the Charlie War is a real war, and I'm not going to argue that at all. I'm not going to take the position of being an able elitist. I hate factionalism. I also hate shard factionalism, if you want to call it that. But when there is a server that is dedicated for newer players, you tend to find a easier approach to applying battlefield tactics in those scenarios, because you don't have a lot of veterans that are stuck within those particular metas and explaining to new players how to use them, but you also have the other side of that coin where you will have some new players who just don't really know how to push a trench, or how to take a town base, or how to attack a battleship from the ground, or from the coast, for example. Those are just some examples off the top of my head that Charlie players won't naturally know how to engage with. So that leads to a lot of the stalemate that we now see. Additionally, we also have to keep in mind that the Charlie server is live and enabled because of the amount of players that influx within Foxhole during things such as holidays, more time for people to play games, as well as obviously the various Steam sales that occur where Foxhole is on discount and a lot of players are interested in trying the game out. And additionally, we also have to keep in mind that the Charlie server basically follows the same rules as Able. It had the same starting conditions as War 119, and additionally it also had the same impact in how the war shaped out. A lot of the tactics that were used and a lot of the players that got involved with Charlie basically followed the same rhythm as the Able servers did, except there was no large-scale operations that took place. And as I go through this video, you'll see that these large-scale operations is kind of how these wars tend to play out. Okay, so now the question is like, why don't we just let it run? Why don't we just leave the Charlie servers up and let the players figure it out? Well, first of all, we have to recall what the starting condition for this Charlie War was. Remember, it matched War 119, and for those people who didn't play War 119 on Able, and they can't quite remember that far back, remember that all the starting bases started off with a lot of resources. Specifically, it started with 4,000 soldier supplies each, 12,000 clips of ammo, 4,000 starting rifles, as well as a numerous amount of BMATs and HE grenades or mammons. Now, this is very significant because a tier 3 starting base with 4,000 shirts is a monstrous bastion to defeat, especially when you put in perspective that a lot of new players are going to be assaulting those bases. Specifically, a tier 3 base or a tier 3 town base with a lot of garrison houses and safe houses that are all stocked to the brim around it. Now, within Able, those resources were used up very, very quickly because we were really fighting tooth and nail for every single victory point and for every single town base on the server itself. However, on Charlie, once those resources basically dried up, that would have been an opportunity for players to go in and destroy the town bases and move forward. But this took a lot of time for those particular areas to exchange hands. And this is still a problem on the Charlie server. I actually logged into Charlie server for the first time today, and I went and had a look at what the resources look like. The front lines are essentially quite dry, but all the backline defensive positions still have thousands and thousands and thousands of starting resources that the players still will have access to. So just because all those victory points and all those town bases to get to those victory points are still very well stocked, just because of the devs at the start of the war, it will take a long time for these positions to be sieged. It's not impossible, but considering that not everyone knows how to use a ballista rush or how a chieftain works, it might take a very, very long time for a single town to exchange hands. Additionally, it's quite important that the tech tree is a learning experience for all the players that take part in the Foxhole experience itself. There's a reason why when a war starts, we don't immediately have access to battle tanks and super heavy artillery and battleships. We have to work towards those goals collaboratively as each army within the game itself. So if you're a new player and you log in and you go to Charlie and you're like, cool, I can't wait to build my own tank, etc., 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 it is a bit of a detraction of the true game experience if you just kind of log in and 99.99% of the work has already been done for you. Players can kind of just go in, get as much salvage and as much components and as much resources that they want. They don't have to worry about figuring out when the tech unlocks within the tech tree itself. It's already there. They just get to go build it, and then they go and move their tank forward. Very little experience on how to do things, and then they just get obliterated by automated defenses or an opposing group of players that are already pushing on their particular front that they choose to go and attack. So having that natural progression of, well, first you have push guns, then you have armored cars, then you have scout vehicles, and then you have light tanks, is the true experience that the Foxhole tech tree is supposed to be seen as, at least from the developer's point of view. So when we're now stuck in a position where the Charlie War has gone on for 3 months, and the devs need to make a call whether or not they want to have their new players experience a fully unlocked tech tree with fully stocked resources everywhere, well, maybe it is not a bad idea to start it afresh so that more experience and more progression, not only in absolute new players, but the now Charlie vets will have going into the next scenario that the devs will throw them into in the next starting conditions. Now, that brings us into a scenario now of wars are not supposed to last forever. This is actually one of the key selling points within Foxhole. Now, yes, I know that in the Steam description it says online persistent war, but for those wars to be experienced, they need to have a starting point and an end point. And this is, again, one of the key features of Foxhole as an MMO compared to something like World of Warcraft or Ashes of Creation or any of those other well-known MMOs out there. You as a person don't have player progression in a traditional sense. Yes, you do gain ranks and you do gain a player level to allow access to certain aspects of the game like regiment creation, etc. However, the true progression that you get to experience is actual game experience itself. And for you to truly grasp every aspect of the game, you do need to be put in various scenarios that have battles occurring on certain tech levels, as this will get you to appreciate and apply certain tactics to overcome certain barriers in the game. So, just by an example, if a destroyer shows up to come and bomb your town base, and you don't have a battleship teched, how do you go and defeat it at your current tech level? You don't have an SPG to deploy against it. You might only have 120s, but you'll have to figure out where to deploy those 120s, how you're going to run shells to it, or do you need to change up tactics and do things with gunboats and figuring out how to cut off that destroyer's logi line and then go and assault it to push it off your town base. Alright, so the true gameplay loop of Foxhole is to experience these various scenarios. And you can't do that if the world is in a complete stalemate. Otherwise, we're just going to get in a scenario where the only way that victory points will be taken is by nuking them into obliteration. And that was a pattern on Charlie for a while, until the actual process of harvesting resources enough to use those nukes basically burned out a lot of Charlie players. And at least that's what one of the Charlie players talked about on one of the various discords that I'm part of. They managed to launch 2 nukes. Awesome, great. But they didn't want to do a 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th or 7th nuke just because of the rare mat requirement to get it. That is a lot of salvage that needed to be scooped, and they just didn't have the player amount or the player time to do it. So this is another reason why the devs are cutting this short. We're supposed to have multiple wars. You're supposed to experience the game multiple times and in multiple scenarios. That's why we have different starting conditions. That's why we have different regiments. That's why we have different tech trees. You're supposed to try things out. You're not always going to start with the same amount of weapons unlocked at certain points of time, but generally speaking, it's the progression that makes the game replayable. It makes us coming back and makes us prepared for certain stages of the war, knowing that we'll be able to do certain things and we'll have different windows of opportunities to apply certain tactics before they become irrelevant. You don't experience this when it's super late game, where everyone basically has everything unlocked. And that is a problem that Charlie players are facing now. They have extreme burnout because they have everything. They don't know exactly what to do or how to conquer certain things. And that's why the devs are putting a halt to it. Now, for these reasons, I truly don't think that the Charlie players are experiencing this right now because the devs don't care, or it's not a real world, or the game is dead, or worst case scenario, it was the able players complaining to the devs to, get them to stop the Charlie shard to merge the shards themselves. I don't think it's because of these reasons. And I know people are very vocal about it, and there are some amazingly good counter yappers on Reddit and on the Foxhole official Discord. But in my opinion, I believe that Charlie is being reset for a very good reason. And again, just gonna warn you, this is where I yap. This is where I really go off a tangent here. I think it's because Charlie is being reset due to player burnout caused by the following clip that I secretly snuck onto Charlie and recorded. So here, just to prove I wasn't Charlie, I went and had a bit of a sneak peek about what the bases look like, and for most of the Charlie hexes, this is what I saw. Massive, monstrous, concrete bases literally lined along the Warden borders. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not hating on the players who built these. These are awesome. I love to see them. If, as an able player, this is a feat of engineering that I take my hat off to these Charlie players who managed to collect all the concrete and are supplying this very well with M-subs every single day. These are truly, truly amazing fortifications. However, there is an inherent problem with seeing fortress like this on a new player server, and that's where the main yap comes in. I think concrete is too strong. So there's a reason for this. Concrete is a force multiplier when it comes to defending positions. All the able players know this. Now, when I say concrete is too strong, I know the first response I'm going to get, I know the first YouTube comments and the first Reddit responses I'm going to get online is going to be, haha, that is just a skill issue on the Charlie players. Okay, dudes, cool. Touch a bit of grass. I know concrete is not really all that strong, but I need to explain why from the perspective of a new player. Alright, so concrete is, like I said, a force multiplier for defenders. When you want to hold a position, you put down 3 or 4 bunker cores, you tech them to concrete, and then you spam giant concrete monster defenses like we saw in that video clip, and then you hold. And this makes it incredibly difficult for attackers to bust open. Why? Because of artillery. So in the game, we have artillery that is an oppressive force on both offense and defensive operations. If the enemy comes in a large amount of waves or a large attack on a certain location, the best way to defend against it is to shell them with artillery, because as we know, artillery has a large area of effect. It has a psychological effect on the players attacking. A lot of players hate being killed by a 120 shell the moment they leave their bunker base, and of course there are inherent problems with attacking into an artillery laden area because tier 1 and tier 2 bunker bases are very hard to defend against concentrated fire. So for defense, artillery is amazing. It's very easy to park a Colonial 120 on the road next to a pallet or next to a storage room, and then they just constantly throw shells out at any wardens trying to push into it. And of course, as we know, the Warden 120 can be placed within bunker bases themselves. However, there is one key thing to keep in mind when you're defending with artillery or attacking with artillery, and that's because there is only one form of risk-free counterplay in this dichotomy of offense versus defense. Meet the howitzer garrison. This is the only tool that we have in the game to passively defend against artillery strikes. Every other form of artillery counterplay involves players, it involves strategy, and it involves a lot of effort to defeat. So, howitzers are a staple within defending certain key locations passively through the use of these various bunker bases, which obviously requires concrete. So for those who are a little bit unfamiliar with how howitzers work, and here I'm just going to yap a little bit about the basics of howitzers just so that the Charlie players understand why their world is being reset. Here we have a scenario where a Colonial artillery gun, this could be a 120 or it could be a 150. In this case, I just chose the 120 as an example. If an artillery position attacks a howitzer, remember it uses a player-made shell to land on the bunker piece to deal damage to it. In this scenario, a howitzer has an opportunity to attack back through automatic retaliation. So, in a one-on-one scenario like this, the 120 shell lands on the howitzer, and the howitzer gets to shoot one shell back. However, when it comes to large concrete bases, there are additional factors that get added in favor of the howitzer position. Specifically, within bunker bases, there are garrison upgrades that you can apply to any square or triangle that has a free wall section available within the bunker itself. So these bunker upgrades serve a multitude of different purposes. However, there is a key upgrade that allows howitzer garrisons and AT garrisons to have an increased fire rate if that garrison upgrade is prevalent anywhere within the bunker network. So if there is multiple bunker pieces around and they have a washroom upgrade in this example, all howitzers will shoot 3% faster. This effect can stack up to 20 times, resulting in an increase of 66% of the howitzer's fire rate. So if we go back to our previous example where a single 120 gun shoots a single howitzer, it will now retaliate of an average about of 4% of 4 shots for the one shell that landed on it. So a 120 shell lands on it from the Colonial artillery gun, and then the howitzer just goes pop, 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 and then all those shells will land around the 120 gun's position. Now that doesn't sound too bad. Well, it gets worse. What if I add in another howitzer right next to the one that got hit? In the current balance of the game, both howitzers get to retaliate 4 times. So now, for every one shell, remember, player-made shell, that lands on a howitzer with another howitzer next to it, we'll call this a howitzer trap because it has multiple howitzers facing the same direction and they are connected. You now have 8 retaliatory artillery strikes against that attacking position. And all you need to do is basically just build this defensive position and do some repairs if the need arises. So in a scenario like this, we also have to consider the impact on the logistics for this back and forth battle. If you are the attackers, in this case you're the colonials, you're attacking a warden concrete fortress, all the logistics that get into play just to sustain the attack using artillery, we're completely ignoring what the other players are doing, involves construction materials or basic materials to repair any of the damaged guns, because if you lose your gun, no more artillery, it's over. You need to bring in shells, because remember these are player-fired shells, and obviously a lot of people are going to die, so you need to bring in soldier supplies. And if you're the defender, the only thing you realistically need to bring is BMATs, just to repair the guns. And over time, with every shell that lands, the howitzers will retaliate and eventually the attackers will be repelled. In my opinion, this is incredibly strong. This is a difficult challenge to overcome. So here's a bit of trivia for you. If you are an attacker, how would you kill this? This is a menacing defensive line, very well built, very well supplied. There's no decay anywhere. There's lots of interesting meta pieces that are defending against tanks and infantry rushes. But more specifically, there are howitzers everywhere. Now, imagine if you're a colonial player on a 150 gun, for example, a Thunderbolt, and you hit a shell that lands... Oh, I've got to switch on my laser pointer. And you land a shell over here. And the AoE splashes onto this piece, and this piece, and this piece. What'll happen? Well, you will have, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 shells that will be retaliated on top of you for one 150 shell that you missed and don't really apply any damage on these very difficult to destroy high health, high integrity concrete pieces. You won't be able to break this with a small scale operation. This is a monster fortress, so the only way that you can beat something like this is by having a lot more players and even more logistics. And you have to account for losses, and you're essentially trading hardware, player time, logistics for the ability to break these defenses. And I'm sorry to say this, and as much as the Charlie server, in my opinion, is a real war, the Charlie players do not have the skill and the experience needed yet to defeat these type of defenses. You need veteran players to lead the charge and show you how it's done. Now, that's not saying that a fortress like this is impenetrable, and the fortresses that I showed in the actual live footage from Charlie from a little bit earlier is not impenetrable. It can be done. And there are some great YouTube videos that demonstrate how able players are able to break these concrete monstrosities. So here are some screen caps of a couple of tactics that both Colonial's Wardens can use. I'm not going to play the videos here. Instead, I will link these YouTube videos in the description of this YouTube video. Please go take a look at them and give the respective owners the credit that they deserve. But here's just a screen cap of one of the ways that you can defeat a concrete monster like this. In this case, we have a colonial force that is led by 141, and they are using siege tanks to go and break all the forward concrete defenses so that they can have an in, and then they rush in and destroy a whole bunch of storm cannons, intel centers, and various other bunker pieces that the Wardens have failed to defend within a reasonable time frame. Additionally, if you want to break a monster fortress like this, even though it has howitzer traps, you can actually do it with artillery. And again, here is an example of a Warden attacking force making use of the self-propelled gun, or the SPGs, or in this case the Floodstain, to assault this large colonial monster base to break it and eventually take over the region. And I think they won this war from this clip as well. Again, if you're interested to see how they did it, please take a look at the YouTube description. I will have a link to that video available, and you can see how the able players break concrete monsters. And then finally, I also have a clip from the last war. This was a operation led by Kiwi, and we went and basically went and destroyed a whole bunch of concrete meta pieces, as well as a whole bunch of concrete bunker cores. But most importantly, we assaulted some storm cannons that were defending key locations that the Wardens were trying to capitalize on. And again, this was done with infantry, but we had very few Wardens logging in to defend this concrete itself. So you can do this in smaller operations, but you literally have to be playing against absolutely zero defenders, which is what this scenario was. I do have a YouTube short about this. I will also link it. You can go and quickly see how we went in, and in about 15 minutes, we broke a whole bunch of concrete bases with a lot of coordination and just pure experience from the veteran players assaulting this concrete base. So, my final retort then is, can Charlie players do this? Absolutely. You guys can, and I believe in you. However, you guys can't do it for half the map. Let's be real. These large-scale operations require a lot of experience, and it's very easy to make a mistake, and then your entire attacking force gets wiped, which will lead to more player burnout. And this is the problem that the devs are facing now. Should these massive concrete monstrosities stay on the battlefield, burn out all the players, and get people to log out? I don't think the devs want that to happen. So, Charlie unfortunately needs to be reset, and everyone will have a chance to try again. Try some different tactics. Go into the next Charlie war with the same vigor that you had at the start of the war. Try and push the opportunities that are presented when certain tech gets unlocked. Try some different tactics and ask questions. Ask questions. How do you defeat concrete monstrosities? How do you do a tap op? How do you lead a tank battalion? Ask questions on Reddit. Ask questions on the Foxhole official Discord. My YouTube comments are always open, as well as take a look at a lot of the other amazing content creators out there, like Robert Loves Games, like Freak, like I Saw a Bear, and find out how we do it. We're more than willing to help and show you guys how to do it. And if you don't ask for help, if you just want to figure it out, eventually you're going to run into the same problem that happened with this current Charlie war. You're going to stagnate and you're going to suffer. And we don't want you guys to quit. We want all the Charlie players to eventually feel confident enough to try their skill in Able. All the Able players want this. This is why there's a stigma of being anti-Charlie within Foxhole, because we all want you guys on Able. But we understand that new players can be easily overwhelmed. Foxhole's a difficult game. It requires a lot of teamwork. It requires a lot of communication, and it requires experience. And the only way you guys are going to experience things is by playing Charlie the same way we play Able. Get to an endpoint, start over, try again, optimize, get better, get experience, and have fun. Okay. That's why things are coming to an end. The devs don't hate you. There might be some salty Able players who don't want Charlie to exist, but they don't hate you either. They're just opinionated. Please, go back into Foxhole. Keep fighting these last couple of hours in Charlie server. Try and tip the scales and get the last victory point that you need to win. But accept the fact that things need to move on. Things need to progress. And hey, Airborne is only like half a year away. So get as much playtime in as you can. It's going to be epic. Alright. Good luck. Charlie, we love you guys. Don't let the comments or the stupid rhetoric on various social medias get you down. We know you can do it. You just have to ask the right questions in the right spirit. And ultimately, come and try out Able. If this is burning you out, if you don't like this, we have plenty of vets willing to teach people on Able. Come try us out. You won't regret it. Alright, that's it for me. Again, if you have any further questions or if you would like me to discuss any of these topics, I will apply my mind as best I can and help as many people as possible, because Foxhole is awesome and you should definitely try it out. Alright, that's it for me. WL Legendary signing out, and I think I may have finished this yap before 40 minutes, which is a personal record, so go me.